evening, church. Nice to see you all out tonight. We're in 2 Kings chapter 6 this evening. I'm going to find that. There we go. All right. Mm-hmm. It was. Well, you don't tend to, hang out as a king by being poor. So, yeah. Yeah, we're actually we're gonna spend a minute in 2 Kings chapter 5 because there was something we didn't get to on Sunday that I really wanted to. But first, let's start with a prayer. Our God, thank you for your word. Thank you for us being here together. Thank you for this day that we've had. And even though it's at the end of the evening, some of us may be feeling a little tired or burned out. At least, open our minds and our hearts to what we're studying, help give us the energy and the enthusiasm to dig into your word, to be a part of the study, and be with everyone who's studying tonight and in the other classes as well. We always pray that our efforts will help us be more like you. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. It was the last time we studied about Naaman and how God healed him. We saw that Naaman was a pretty stand-up guy overall. We did acknowledge that he had some problems when it came to following God's word, when it came to how he was to be healed, because he had something in his head. He had a story in his head that he had told himself about how he expected the healing to go. It didn't go that way. And he had a problem with that. But overall, outside of that, we saw a person who was a person of character, who was a person his servants cared about and trusted, a person who was generous and full of integrity, and a person who, at the end of this experience, decided he wanted to honor God above all else and to continue honoring God for the rest of his days. This is again the second big miracle of Elisha that's associated with a Gentile instead of benefiting any of the people of Israel. And there was something really interesting in here. So before we get to today's reading, and I think we have time to do this, there's an interesting detail in the account of Naaman that we didn't get to on Sunday. And it's a detail in 5:17. It's right before Naaman says, please understand that when the king leans on my arm and we go into the house of Rimmon, that I'll have to bow when the king bows, and may the Lord forgive me for that. It's just before that. I'm just going to read this one verse here. And then we'll chat a couple minutes about it, and then we'll get into tonight's reading. So verse 17. Naaman responded, this is right after Elisha kind of puts his foot down and says, I am not accepting a gift from you for healing you. And then Naaman says, if not, as in if you won't take a gift from me, if not, please let your servant be given as much soil as a pair of mules can carry. And when he's saying your servant here, he's referring to himself based off the context. For your servant will no longer offer a burnt offering or a sacrifice to any other god but the Lord. So to paraphrase, without the overly humble talking about himself in here, Naaman's saying, if you aren't taking a gift from me, then give me a gift of 2 mule loads of soil, of dirt, because I'm not going to offer any sacrifice except to the Lord God. That strike you as weird? Okay, you're not going to take my gold and silver. Can I have several bags of dirt from you? What do you think's going on here? Do you have any ideas? Go ahead, Caroline. Okay, what connection did you make? Okay, I think you're onto something here. So I worship God when I'm in Israel, and ideally, though Naaman probably didn't know this, I go to Jerusalem specifically, right, to do full worship to God. But otherwise, my other sacrifices and stuff are done in the land of Israel. Maybe there's a connection here with I am taking the land of this God with me so that I can worship him on his land. That could be. Any other ideas? Go ahead. Ooh, okay. I know exactly what that says too. All right. So when not Deuteronomy, when Moses, the guy's name isn't Deuteronomy. That's a cat in cats, old Deuteronomy. When Moses is what? No other Broadway nerds here? Am I the only? Y'all, one of the hard things about being me in Churches of Christ is, do you know how few Church of Christ people are Broadway nerds? Y'all need to get with it. Come on. Okay, anyway. At least watch the movie adaptation of Cats. It's a fun train wreck. Um, but what was I saying? Okay, when Moses is giving God's law, one of the tenets in there, he says, when you worship me, don't make graven images of gold and silver like the nations around you. Instead, make an earthen altar to prepare your sacrifices on. And this is really cool. This is like God asking to be worshiped in a way that is humble and accessible to anyone. Anyone can afford an earthen altar. Not anyone can afford an altar of gold, an altar of silver, an altar made from the cedars of Lebanon, or anything like that. But to build one out of earth and rocks, I can do that. So maybe Naaman had learned of this at some point, maybe through some of his Israelite servants, and maybe he wants to build an altar to God out of the earth of his land. So there are a couple possibilities there. I want to bring God's land with me, or I want to build an altar of earth. And remember, Naaman is coming from a perspective where he's used to God's, in his perspective, being territorial. They're the gods of Moab, the gods of Egypt, the gods of Aram, the God of Israel. There could also be a little hint here of if I'm going to worship God, I want to bring a piece of him with me. So again, in his limited understanding, I think something really cool is going on here, that he's recognizing and understanding a little bit about wanting to have God with him in one way or another, any of those possibilities are legit and possible. The scripture doesn't tell us what was going on in his head when he asks it. But it's an interesting detail there. And, midrashing it a little bit, going a little bit deeper, a little bit wider with it, it opens up this picture of, again, someone who's trying to do right by God, where he is, with the understanding he has, and with the limited tools that he has. And again, Elisha says to him, "Go in peace." That's a blessing. Go in shalom, God's peace. All right, and now we're in chapter 6. So let's read chapter 6. We're only going to read to verse 23 tonight. Sunday we'll start in verse 24 and go on through part of chapter 7. And then that's where we're going to stop as we go into the next quarter. But don't worry, the next quarter is going to pick up right where we leave off. So you don't have to try to hold in your head what was going on for like 3 more months or something. So, 2 Kings 6, verse 1. The sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "Please notice that the place where we live under your supervision is too small for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, where we can each get a log and can build ourselves a place to live there." Elisha said, "Go." Then one said, "Please come with your servants." Elisha answered, "I'll come." So Elisha went with them. And when the prophets came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water, and he cried out, "Oh, my master, it was borrowed." Then the man of God asked, "Where did it fall?" When the prophet showed Elisha the place, the man of God cut a piece of wood, threw it there, and made the iron float. Then Elisha said, "Pick it up." So the prophet reached out and took it. Verse 8. When the king of Aram was waging war against Israel, he conferred with his servants. "My camp will be at such and such a place." But the man of God, Elisha, sent word to the king of Israel, probably Joram, "Be careful passing by this place, for the Arameans are going down there." Consequently, the king of Israel sent word to the place the man of God had told him about. The man of God repeatedly warned the king, so the king would be on his guard. Now, the king of Aram was enraged because of this matter, and he called his servants and demanded of them, "Tell me, which one of us is for the king of Israel?" In other words, which one of you is a traitor? One of his servants said, "No one, my lord the king." Elisha, the prophet in Israel, tells the king of Israel even the words you speak in your bedroom. So the king said, "Go and see where he is, so I can send men to capture him." When he was told Elisha is in Dothan, he sent horses, chariots, and a massive army there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up early and went out, he discovered an army with horses and chariots surrounding the city. So he asked Elisha, "Oh, my master, what are we to do?" Elisha said, "Don't be afraid. For those who are with us outnumber those who are with them." Then Elisha prayed, "Lord, please open his eyes and let him see." So the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw that the mountain was covered with horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. When the Arameans came against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Please strike this nation with blindness." So he struck them with blindness, according to Elisha's word. Then Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will take you to the man you're looking for." And Elisha led them to Samaria. When they entered Samaria, Elisha said, "Lord, open these men's eyes and let them see." So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw that they were in the middle of Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "Should I kill them? Should I kill them, my father?" Elisha replied, "Don't kill them. Do you kill those you have captured with your sword or your bow? Set food and water in front of them so they can eat and drink, and go then to their master." So he prepared, I think that he there's the king. So the king prepared a big feast for them. When they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And these Aramean raiders did not come into Israel's land again. This isn't to say the Arameans never invade Israel again, because the very next verse is going to contradict that. But that is for Sunday. And it's a different king anyway. Okay. So let's divide this up into two sections. The axe head, and then this hunt for Elisha. So talk to me. I mean, what'd you notice? What questions do you have? What connections did you make with the miracle of this axe head? Or did you do as I was tempted to do, and that is just read past it to get to the good stuff? Let me tell you something. In my notes on the axe head are about this long, and my notes about everything after are about this long. I'll go easy on you here. I'm going to jump into this. Yep. Doesn't float very well, does it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing here is don't think of this as the miracle that starts this chapter. Think of this as the last miracle in this series of non-chronological miracles that we've been studying about Elisha. Between chapter 2 and the beginning of chapter 6, the author here focuses almost exclusively on Elisha, at the expense of any historical context, at the expense of any flow with what's going on with the kings or their wars or whatever. He only focuses on this series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 miracles in a row by Elisha. Interspersed with a little war there with Moab, but only to showcase Elisha's power in the middle of that. And I want to walk you through these. And keep this miracle of the axe head in the context of these other miracles not in the context of this battle that happens for the rest of the chapter. That's one of those splits in the middle of a chapter that might as well begin with, as I've said before, and now for something completely different. All right? 2 Kings chapter 2. Elisha departs from the Jordan River. He parts the Jordan using Elijah's mantle. So he's now leaving the area of the Jordan River with a miracle that says God has chosen him as Elijah's replacement. Also in 2 Kings chapter 2, the second miracle, Elisha heals the waters of Jericho. Remember, Jericho had been a region that was cursed. But Elisha comes and he heals that water. And it also is a signal of God's forgiveness in the land. Then we move on to 2 Kings 3, another one with water. 3 miracles in a row with water. Elisha brings forth water for all of the people and animals of Joram, Jehoshaphat, and the king of Edom's combined armies, where there was no water. God abundantly provides through Elisha there. 2 Kings chapter 4, we have the miracle of Elisha providing oil to the widow, enough oil to pay off her debts and sell off even more so that they can live off the proceeds for a while. Again, God forgiving debt and providing abundantly. Still in 2 Kings chapter 4, the next few will be there. Elisha prophesies a Shunammite woman will have a son. God is a God over life. The Shunammite son dies several years later. And Elisha goes and raises that son from the dead. God is now the God over life and death. Immediately after that, the historian records Elisha healing a poisonous stew. Again, God's healing, God's providence. Elisha then multiplies loaves of bread. So again, we have not only healing, but then after that, again, abundance, providing more than what is necessary. 2 Kings, all of 2 Kings chapter 5 revolves around Elisha giving instructions for Naaman's healing, which takes place at the Jordan, but Elisha doesn't go to the Jordan. And now in 2 Kings chapter 6, this record of miracles that all happen in a row end where they begin. In 2 Kings chapter 2, with Elisha's first miracle, he's leaving the Jordan. And here in 2 Kings chapter 6, he's back at the Jordan. The author's tying this up by ending these miracles where they began, with this image of the Jordan. And how many times is the Jordan River important in Scripture? It's a lot, isn't it? And then what actually happens here? The sons of the prophets here, the group that he studies with, who are his trainees, so to speak, they decided that where they're currently living with Elisha isn't enough. They need more space. They need more room to spread out. So they propose going to this place. Interestingly, the Hebrew here has a little bit of a negative connotation to it when Elisha says go, as if he's not happy with this request. It's a little bit of a, and there's also no like shalom with it. It's not like he said to Naaman, go in peace. He's just like, okay, go. And at first, it doesn't even look like he's going to go with them. And they're like, will you come with us? He's like, okay, I'll come. And then they're cutting along, and this one prophet, his axe breaks. Here's a real dig into Scripture for you. Do you know of a law that specifically cites an axe breaking? Go ahead, Jordan. Right. I didn't write the exact scripture down. But yeah, in the laws concerning manslaughter and accidental death, if the head comes off of your axe and strikes a person, so this is this axe head coming off the handle, it's associated with kind of this idea of a curse. Now, in this case, the axe head doesn't hit anyone, right? We're kind of fine and dandy there. That goes off into the water. And what's the problem here? It's borrowed. So what's this prophet thinking I need to do? I borrowed this. I'm gonna have to replace this, aren't I? Yeah, the most expensive part of the axe is now sitting at the bottom of the Jordan River, and that's not a knee-deep river. You don't go creek stomping in the Jordan River. It's down there. It is lost. But here we are with water again. This time, water seems to be what causes something to be lost. And Elisha restores it and thereby forgives this guy of his debt. Which again takes us right back to some of the first miracles he ever performed. Now, do these miracles make a chiasmus? No. I really wanted them to. I was trying, y'all. But it was a waste of time. It was, as Paul would have probably criticized me in his letters to Timothy, foolish speculation. So I dropped it after a few minutes. But now does the inclusion of this miracle make a little bit more sense? Do you see how it fits that narrative arc? Not as an introduction of the things to come, but as a way of concluding and bookending all the things that we've been studying about Elisha and learning about God through Elisha's actions. And I think the author recorded all this the way he did because of what's going to happen next. And it helps us understand these following events. Now let's pick up in the big part. Okay. Now it's your turn for real. Talk to me about what you all noticed there, or what questions you have, or what connections you made with the events regarding this war and the hunt for Elisha. Jordan, go ahead. Okay, go for it. The axe head struck you? No. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Where they say, see the place where we dwell under your charge is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan, and each of us get there along, and let us make a place for us to dwell there. And that particular kind of phrasing, let us go up and do this, let us do this, we see that kind of occur in a few places in Scripture, like in the Tower of Babel, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Let us make a tower so that we don't get scattered. When you talk about at the end of the book of Judges, when all Israel's going after Benjamin, and they're like, let us go up. And that could be part of why Elisha's not very
All right, so Jordan's making a connection here with the request that the prophets are making. Let us go up and do this thing. It sounds a lot like other places where we've heard in scripture prior to this where people have had really bad ideas. In this case, nothing really major comes out of it other than this whole thing with the axe head. All right, but this just let us go and do this. And maybe Elisha saw an attitude in them that was a little bit more negative. Yeah, that was a really interesting connection. I hadn't made that one. Nice. All right. So, Aram, however we want to pronounce it. What do you got for me? Okay, again, Jordan.
I think it was interesting that the king of Syria, or what's the other word?
Aram. Does your translation say Syria?
Yeah,
Cool.
in the
I like that better. Go ahead.
So anyway, he talked about how the king of Israel was have a spy in his rings. But for them to know that Elisha is the one telling the king of Israel all this king's plans,
Mm-hmm.
they must have a spy in his rings.
I wonder. Yeah, that is interesting. I kind of wondered the same thing. Like, how did one of the servants of this king know that Elisha was a prophet in the land of Israel? But then again, we've seen servants in more than one occasion know about Elisha. We know that the people of Syria, or Aram here, have some servants who are captives from Israel. Was this one of them? I don't know. Or are there people in the king of Israel's court reporting back, saying, hey, there's this prophet here telling everything you're doing, even what you're talking about in your bedroom. Like, Elisha sees all and he knows all. He's better than having a spy drone. All right, that is interesting. So what else do you guys see in here? Go ahead, Liney.
God is trying to teach them that they are to rely upon Him and that He's looking out for their best interest if they will obey Him.
Right, yeah. So are you thinking about Elisha's servant looking up and seeing the hosts of God's army there protecting him? Is that what you're connecting to?
Well, even the miracles
Yeah, all the miracles.
that He was from God and
Mm-hmm.
teaching them the perseverance that they could have if they obeyed God. So teaching them to rely upon Him and trusting Him.
Yeah. Yeah, time and again through those miracles, Elisha is trying to teach them about God, about trusting God. And again, you see those thematic elements coming back and again. God is a God of forgiveness, of erasing debts, of abundance. If you'll just trust Him, and we'll see that again in this chapter. Go ahead, John.
As I studied it more and more, you'd have thought that king up there in Iran or Syria would be just really pleased with Israel whenever Naaman comes back with his leper. He's praising that man of God
Mm-hmm.
for having removed that leprosy from him. And yet now, every once in a while, it will say, King Syria warred against Israel.
Yeah. So this is interesting, John, and for all of you. So remember when we started into chapter 3, I said, and even with the story of Naaman, that there are contextual clues in the text that these miracles aren't necessarily in chronological order with the events of the surrounding chapters. Next time when we're together on Sunday, we're going to be with a new king of Syria, or Aram. And this is a king who leans on one of his guards for support, this new king. Does that sound a little bit like the king Naaman was describing? Yeah, and that's a king after this one in the beginning of chapter 6, which then puts these events in chapter 6, verses 8 through 23 before Naaman. Because this is a different king. Because we have a king who gets named. Sometime later, King Ben-Hadad of Aram or Syria brought all his military units. Well, why do we name this king? Because it's an indication that we're at a new king now. This king, this poor guy here, just gets completely unnamed. I didn't look into other historical documents to see who he might have been. All right? So chronologically, we're somewhere earlier than Naaman, and I would even suggest we're somewhere close to the beginning of chapter 3. Because later chapter 4. Yeah, chapter 4. We're somewhere close to the beginning of chapter 4. Because later in chapter 4, do you remember the miracle of the poisoned stew? Why were they going and getting rotten gourds or gourds that they didn't know were safe? Do you remember? Because there was a famine, yeah. There was a famine in the land. Later in this chapter, we're going to be dealing with, when we're with the next king of Syria or Aram and the next siege of Samaria, we're going to be in the middle of a famine in part of that. Which means that thing at the end of chapter 4 about the stew might be happening roughly at the same time as the end of chapter 6. So, this king very likely didn't have a servant healed by the man of God, because that didn't happen yet. So he didn't just forget what happened to Naaman. What happens to Naaman happens with the next king of Syria or the next king of Aram, depending on your translation. And that's where some of this gets a little bit tricky. Because sometimes in the books of Kings, Chronicles, and it definitely happens in the prophets, sometimes the author focuses on a character, a series of events, a theme, at the expense of chronology. Meanwhiles start happening. Meanwhile, this was going on, but it doesn't always tell us. Sometimes it just goes off into the next account, and it's up to us to pay attention to those contextual clues and go, you know what? I don't think this happened in this order. But yeah, so that's really interesting there, John. So that may be what's going on here with our king. So Joram's reign in Israel was back-to-back war. Moab, Syria/Aram, Syria/Aram again, and then he dies. But then again, that was the northern king in a nutshell, northern kingdom in a nutshell. I mean, there are some kings that basically all it says about them is they became king, they did evil in the sight of the Lord, they went to war with the other nations for all of their days, and they died. And that's like everything we get about those kings. They were at war for their entire time. Right? There was a lot of conflict going on. In this case, this guy's trying to get the jump on Joram, isn't he? Because you take out the king, you win. Only it's not working. And we already talked about why. Like, Elisha's helping. Oh, which is another interesting thing. Remember all of those miracles between 2 Kings chapter 2 and the beginning of chapter 6? Out of all 9 of those miracles, how many of them involved a king? And how many of them involved him willingly, happily, proactively helping a king? Remember when he did actually help out in 2 Kings 3? Is there not a man of God we can ask about us running out of water? And Elisha comes to King Joram and goes, don't you have some prophets of Baal to ask? Like, what do you have to do with me? Oh, Jehoshaphat's there. Ugh. Fine, Jehoshaphat's a pretty good guy. Okay, I'm going to help you out here because Jehoshaphat here, but if he wasn't here, we wouldn't even be talking. Now get me a musician. I always have to throw that bit in because I love it so much, right? But all the other times, he's not there. But here, we see Elisha actually, in this case, proactively helping Israel's king. At least as far as what we can tell. It doesn't say anyone had come to him. It says that he was reporting to the king. So that's really interesting there.
Think of all that money that's gone back to the king of Syria. Naaman took it back with him.
Or it hasn't come yet. But yeah.
Yeah, he'd have to.
Yeah. Jordan.
On that note of Elisha proactively helping here, there's a common theme we see throughout the story about blind and then going on to see.
Mm-hmm.
So you have his servant who sees the enemy, and then he's able to see what's protecting him.
Yeah.
You have the Syrians who are made blind and then given back their sight. And there's this, I think it's very intentional
Mm-hmm.
that was being used. Because who is Elisha and God trying to get to see something important? And that's the kingdom of Israel.
Yeah.
They're supposed to see, we're not with God right now. We should be with God. This is what God does for us. He is our king. He is our Lord. He is our God. And they don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you couldn't hear him, Jordan was talking about how in this chapter there's this recurring theme of God opening people's eyes. Right here, Elisha is opening the king of Israel's eyes to the threat of the king of Aram. Then God's going to open his servant's eyes, Elisha's servant's eyes, to see God's power protecting them. And then the blind soldiers coming into Samaria, their eyes are going to be open to see the reality of their situation. And what Jordan was saying is, all of this is building up to, and this ties in with something Lanny said earlier, God trying to open the eyes of Israel to the fact that he is there for them, and they continually reject him. They continually reject him. Now, can you imagine? Oh, go ahead, Heather.
No, this is a separate thing.
Yeah, go for it.
I just was sort of noticing that when the people are blinded and then they're led to Samaria and then they can see again, I just felt like the king was maybe a little too eager to start killing people.
You think?
And I don't know, I just thought that was weird.
The king was really eager to get stabby, wasn't he? But credit where credit's due, he at least checks in with Elisha first before he starts stabbing, which is, we're always interested in firsts. Which is the first time we see Joram, if this is Joram, probably is, ask the man of God what to do before he does it. We definitely see in his head, I'm ready to kill these people. And Elisha's like, whoa, wait. Who said anything about killing here? Do you kill prisoners of war? What's wrong with you, man? But then, and I love this at the end here, Elisha doesn't just say, do no harm. Elisha doesn't just say, don't hurt them. But you see how he then goes the next step. Give them water. Give them food. And then the last verse even describes it, or the last couple verses here. Yeah, last verse. Even describes this as being a feast. They abundantly provide. You see that recurring theme here for these soldiers, for these enemies. And then send them safely home. And then, with this imagery of a feast, back in ancient times, and even in the Middle East to this day, welcoming someone to your table, providing food for them, offering them a feast, is more than hospitality. It's a symbol of my protection of you. You are safe when you are with me. It is a bond of peace. And that's not lost on this group, because this group doesn't invade again. Combination of God's power in that, but then the abundant generosity and this offering of peace from the people of Israel. They go away, and this group doesn't attack again. And I could not help but think immediately of Psalm 23. He lays out a table and seats me with my enemies, and I fear no evil. Because at that table, I am safe. God is providing that safety. All right, anything else about this chapter before we wrap up? Go ahead. Oh, do I lump this in like with the others? No, I don't categorize them with the others. I see this as like starting back into the historical narrative of Israel at this point. But if you did, go right ahead, because it would be totally legit to do so and would fit very well in thematically. But then we end up with a weird number 10 there instead of 3 threes, which doesn't matter. Yeah, so next time, oh man, next time. Y'all, next time, we're in for a wild ride for the next class. Buckle up, because there are only a couple places in the Bible that cannibalism comes up. And guess what? It's coming up next time. Oh, I was really not looking forward to this part. Well, thank you all for your time. I hope you all have a super safe drive home tonight. Stay safe out there. Be good to yourselves. Take care of each other. And have a good night.